the biggest German research institutes before the announcement said that if a scenario like this would come about, we would probably lose about 15% of exports to the United States. So given that the United States is our biggest trading partner, that would be a severe impact for our economy. But it is always the case that the country levying the tariffs is also very heavily hit. And given that the United States is levying tariffs against the rest of the world, it also reduces the ability of the U.S. economy to adapt flexibly by changing its supply chains. All supply chains going into the United States will all of a sudden become much more expensive, which is also detrimental to the U.S. economy.
You said that obviously the EU is now working out how it's going to respond, and there seem to be several camps. One of those camps is retaliate to negotiate. Where do you sit? What do you think the EU should be doing in the next few days?
Well, we will definitely plead for the European Union to be constructive and to emphasize the interest in a negotiated solution. In fact, in the document of the current coalition agreement, both parties put in as a proposal a free trade agreement between the European Union and the United States of America with the goal of eliminating tariffs. And that would be the ultimate level playing field. If both sides charge zero on everything, then the level playing field would be entire and we wouldn't have to argue about who's charging what. So in that sense, we will always be on the side of reducing instead of increasing tariffs, eliminating non-tariff barriers to trade. But of course, if that doesn't work and there is no negotiation or the negotiations fail, then the European Union should take countermeasures in form of tariffs levied as well.
Donald Trump is determined this is good news for America. What's your view on that? Is this going to help the Americans in the long term?
Well, every study that I've read about the first series of tariffs levied under the previous Trump administration, the effect, even on a long-term basis, has been negative. Unemployment, it's been negative. On wages, it's been negative, and it's tended to increase inflation. So the verdict in the economic sphere is quite clear that, as Martin Wolf from the FT said, tariffs are good politics because they tend to be short-term popular, but they are bad policy because of their detrimental long-term economic effects.
For anyone at home who's kind of confused by all of this financial information coming out, can you lay it out bare? If this turns into a full trade war between the EU and the US, how serious would that be for both those blocks and nations, but also for the world?
Well, the U.S. is, for Germany, our biggest trading partner. So in that sense, there cannot be a country in the world where such a trade conflict could have more severe consequences. How severe it will be will also depend on our reaction. As I said, we urged the European Union as a reaction not only to respond to the US, but also to talk to Indonesia, India, the Mercosur countries, all of which the European Union has been negotiating free trade agreements now for years and years and years with no result. The Mercosur has been signed, it hasn't been ratified yet. We need to fast turbocharge those things and accelerate the opportunity for our businesses if the US market will be harder to access, to be able to diversify into other regions of the world with lower tariffs. And if you see how some regions of the world are reacting, you're already seeing some of that. I can only name the China, Japan, South Korea joint statement, which shows that that regions of the world that don't always have a tradition of cooperating are all of a sudden finding together, and therefore we don't have a choice but to reach out to other regions of the world and make trade easier with those regions. And if we do that, of course, the risk of a global expansion of this is much, much lower. So it's also up to us on how we respond, not only with respect to the US, but also to the rest of the world.
So just to clarify that, are you suggesting that in the future, the US, if these tariffs continue, could be sidelined and you could partner more with other countries, maybe, for example, China?
The United States is such a huge economy; they will never be sidelined. I mean, I wouldn't agree with. But of course, if the reaction is a smart reaction by the EU, and to say we'll make it easier to trade with huge, growing, aspiring economies. I named India, Indonesia. I could also name Malaysia, Thailand, many others. And Latin America is full of fast expanding countries, hence the importance of Mercosur. Then, of course, the directionality of trade will change, and maybe the U.S. will mostly suffer from the fact that their businesses, given that they are levying tariffs on the rest of the world in its entirety, won't be able to respond flexibly, because all imports from all countries will increase in price, and the businesses just can't do what hopefully we will be able to do, namely diversify and substitute, because they're levying import duties from everywhere.